I thought it was over. The funeral was quiet. Gray skies, low voices, no flowers, just like Dad wanted. My sister Marlene handled everything. She arranged the service, coordinated the pastor, and stood at the front with her hand resting gently on the casket like a dutiful daughter in a photograph. No one knew the last time she'd visited before the hospital stay. No one cared. She moved fast after the funeral, told me there was a will, said Dad had left things clear. I nodded. I trusted her. I always had, even when I shouldn't have. We were all that was left, no aunts, no cousins, just us. And now just her and me. 3 weeks later, the documents arrived in a large brown envelope. The will, the assets, the list. Marlene's name was everywhere: executor, beneficiary, sole inheritor of the house bank account, and even Dad's old truck. My name, not even a mention under personal belongings. There was no letter, no explanation. I sat in the same kitchen where Dad used to sip his coffee and read the newspaper, staring at the papers that erased me. I didn't cry. I didn't call Marlene. I just placed the envelope in a drawer, poured myself some tea, and tried to breathe. I told myself maybe this was Dad's way of keeping things simple. Maybe he thought I didn't care about the house. Maybe he trusted Marlene to share. But weeks passed, and she never did. When I finally called her, she answered on the third ring chipper. "Oh, hey, I got the will." A pause. "It's what Dad wanted," she said, like a closing line to a conversation I didn't know had started. "Okay," I replied, and I meant it. I wasn't going to fight her. I wasn't going to reduce our father's memory to lawyers and resentment. So I let it go. I returned to my routines, my life, my own small home with creaky stairs and a garden that still bloomed every spring, until the lawyer called. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I still remember the sun through the blinds, the soft hum of the dryer in the background. "Miss Hale," the voice said. "Yes, this is Daniel Brooks. I handled your father's will." I braced myself. "I was going through the archives," he continued, "and I found something, a handwritten page in your father's handwriting, dated 6 days before the final will was signed and filed." I didn't speak. "I'd like to send you a scanned copy," he said. I could hear typing in the background, the buzz of a fax machine, the clicking of a mouse. "Of course," I whispered. 30 minutes later, it arrived. An image file, black ink on yellowing paper. My father's handwriting, unmistakable, loopy, careful, slightly slanted. At the top, revised distribution plan. Below that, bullet points dividing the house savings and possessions equally between me and Marlene. And at the bottom, in clear script, this version reflects my final wishes. Dad? The date was 6 days before the notarized will Marlene had submitted. I stared at the screen, heart-pounding, throat dry. It wasn't just a note, it was proof. Proof that my father hadn't forgotten me. Proof that someone else had decided to erase me. The lawyer followed up later that evening. "Legally, it's a gray area," he admitted. "Handwritten wills are tricky, but morally, you have every right to ask questions." I didn't sleep that night, not because I was angry, but because I knew this wasn't over. And my sister, she was about to hear from me. Marlene had always been the one who knew how to spin a story. Even as kids, she could break something and blame it on me with just the right tears. She had this way of making people believe her version, no matter how far it was from the truth. I was quiet, observant, the kind of child who memorized details, but never knew how to speak them out loud, fast enough to win an argument. She knew that about me, and she used it. When we were teenagers, she got caught skipping school and told our dad she'd just been walking me home because I felt sick. I didn't say a word, I just nodded. Dad believed her. When she left for college, she barely called. I stayed close to home, helped take care of things when Mom got sick, took over the grocery shopping, the yard work, the little things Dad never admitted he struggled with after she passed. When Dad had his first fall, I was the one who drove him to the hospital. The one who made his appointments, checked his blood pressure, and figured out how to set up online bill pay. Marlene sent flowers, twice. But when she came back just before the end, wearing a tailored coat and her polished smile, people praised her. She came home for her father. She's so strong, She's such a good daughter." I said nothing, because I had already learned something important. The one who shows up last can still take center stage if you let them. And I let her. When Dad died, I figured she'd want to help handle arrangements, maybe give a eulogy. I was fine with that. Honestly, I was relieved. I was tired, grieving, worn down. But what I didn't expect was how quickly she'd step in and take over everything. She told the lawyer she was Dad's preferred executor. She told the funeral home I'd been too emotional to handle decisions. She told extended family I was taking space and that she'd keep them informed. And she told me not to worry. "I've got this," she said with that practiced, reassuring tone that had fooled people since we were kids. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that maybe finally she was showing up for real, that maybe this was her version of stepping in. So when the will came, and I was left with nothing, not even the family photo albums, I was stunned, but not entirely surprised. This was classic Marlene. Rewrite the script, play the heroine, claim the ending. Only this time there was one problem. Dad had left a draft, and that draft was dated after her version. She hadn't expected that, and neither had I. But for the first time in my life, I had a version of the truth in my hands that she couldn't twist, and I wasn't going to let it disappear. The envelope was thick with a gold seal that made it look more ceremonial than it deserved. I opened it slowly, sitting at Dad's kitchen table, the same one where he used to sip his tea and quiz me on state capitals. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Inside was the official version of the will. Not a copy, the real thing. Marlene's name appeared 12 times. Mine, not once. She was listed as executor sole heir, full owner of the house, the savings account, the land, and even the pickup truck that hadn't run in 5 years. Dad's coin collection gone. His tools gone. The heirloom watch that had belonged to our grandfather, hers. There was no letter, no personal message, no mention of my other daughter. Just a legal document that painted a very clean, very final picture. It wasn't just the absence that hit me, it was the precision. It felt intentional, like someone had gone line by line and made sure there was no trace of me. I stared at the pages for a long time. Then I folded them neatly, slid them back into the envelope, and tucked them in the drawer next to the refrigerator, the one where Dad kept pens that no longer worked, and batteries that might still have life in them. It wasn't the money that hurt. It wasn't the house or the truck or the land. It was the idea that my father, who I sat with through doctor's appointments and long, slow silences, could have left me nothing. It didn't feel like him. I tried to believe that maybe he'd been tired. Maybe Marlene had convinced him that she'd handle things better. Maybe he'd trusted that she'd share. But when I called her just once and asked why, she didn't even try to soften it. If you wanted something, she said, you should have been more involved. More involved I'd been here. Every week. Every grocery run. Every aching morning when he couldn't button his own shirt. I had been involved in every way that mattered, except apparently the legal ones. I hung up. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked into Dad's study. It still smelled like pipe tobacco and cedar. The curtains were drawn dust, hanging in the late afternoon light like particles of memory. I opened the bottom drawer of his old desk, the one he always said was just junk, and found a leather-bound notebook. Inside were scribbled notes, addresses, quotes from books numbers I didn't recognize. And tucked into the back cover, folded into quarters, was a yellow sheet of paper. The handwriting hit me first. Dad's. Loopy. Careful. Slanted slightly to the left, just like his notes on my birthday cards. At the top, revised distribution plan, March 18th. It was dated 6 days before the official will had been filed. Underneath a list, half to Marlene, half to me. At the bottom, this version reflects my final wishes. Dad. I sat there, notebook open on my lap, not knowing whether to feel relief or rage, because in that moment, I knew 2 things for certain. 1, my father hadn't forgotten me. And 2, my sister had made sure no one else would remember me either. I didn't rush to the lawyer. I held the note for 2 days before I made the call. Something about the page, yellowed handwritten, creased just slightly, Or he must have folded it with those careful, trembling hands, made me feel like I was holding him. Like this was more than a document. It was a final whisper. When Mr. Brooks, the attorney, answered my call, he sounded surprised. He thought everything had already been settled. I just found something I said in my father's handwriting, dated 6 days before the notarized "Will you" filed. He asked me to scan it and send it over. I did, along with a photo of the full page in the notebook for context. He said he'd get back to me after reviewing it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anxiety, but because for the first time since Dad died, I felt like he had spoken to me again. Not with words, not with a hug, but with clarity, with fairness. He hadn't erased me. He had remembered. The next morning, Mr. Brooks called back. "I can't lie," he said. "This complicates things." I braced myself. The handwriting looks authentic. The timeline is odd. It was written just before the final version we filed. He paused. "Was your sister present when that last version was signed?" "She told me she handled it all," I said. "I wasn't there." He sighed. "I believe you, and I believe that draft may reflect your father's true intentions. The legal weight is murky without formal witnesses, but ethically, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. We both knew what had happened, and so did Marlene, because I sent her a copy that same afternoon. She didn't reply with anger, not immediately. First came silence. Then, 24 hours later, a one-line email. "This changes nothing. Dad made his choice." That was it. No denial, no acknowledgement. But the fact she responded at all told me everything. She knew. I thought about calling her, thought about asking why, asking how she could sit across from me after the funeral and pretend everything was fair, asking how she looked our neighbors in the eye when she claimed she had done right by him. But I didn't. Instead, I called Mr. Brooks again. "I don't want to fight her in court," I said, "but I don't want to disappear either." He was quiet for a moment. Then maybe he said, "You don't fight. You just tell the truth." 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. The lawyer published a letter. It was in the local newspaper, the same one Dad used to circle crossword puzzles, in the one Mom clipped recipes from. A short, open letter. No names, no finger-pointing. Just this. As someone who has served this community for over 30 years, I've come to believe that legal accuracy and moral clarity do not always walk hand in hand. A recent situation reminded me how deeply family stories shape what's fair, and how sometimes the voice of the departed deserves to be heard, even after all the ink has dried. People noticed. And even though he never mentioned her name, everyone knew who he was talking about. Because in a town like ours, stories travel faster than facts. Marlene didn't speak to me again. No calls, no emails, just absence. But I heard from others. A neighbor at the farmer's market leaned in close one day and whispered, "You know your father always spoke so proudly of both his daughters. I'm glad people are hearing the whole story now." I nodded. Said nothing, because the story had already started to move without me. Not because I fought for it, but because truth has a way of echoing when you leave enough silence for it to breathe. Marlene kept the house, the money, the titles. On paper, she won. But in every room she entered, she now had to wonder, what do they know? What do they believe? I didn't take anything from her. I didn't sue. I didn't shout. I didn't smear her name online. I simply gave people the chance to see what I saw, to know what Dad really meant to leave. She changed the will, but she couldn't change his handwriting. She couldn't erase the curve of his letters, the way he signed Dad, with that little flourish, the way he wrote my name beside words like fairness split equally and final wishes. That she couldn't rewrite. And that haunted her more than any lawsuit ever could. A few months later, I walked past the house. It looked different somehow. The shutters were painted gray. The rose bush was gone. Marlene had tried to modernize everything, make it less him, but something about it looked empty. Not because the furniture had changed, but because she couldn't fill the space with what mattered most on her. Meanwhile, I had found my own rhythm again. I didn't need the house. I had my own. Smaller, quieter, but filled with things that spoke gently of the people I loved. Photographs, recipe cards, the crossword puzzle Dad left unfinished on his last Sunday morning. I framed that handwritten will and tucked it inside a book of poems he used to read from. Not for court, not for vengeance, just for remembrance. Because what he left me wasn't an account or a title. He left me truth. He left me the strength to walk away. He left me the wisdom to know that peace doesn't come from winning, it comes from knowing who you are, even when someone tries to write you out. Have you ever been erased from a story that should have been yours? Have you ever chosen silence over battle, only to realize the truth had its own voice? Share your story in the comments. Your quiet strength may be exactly what another woman needs to read today. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear.